Calcutta today is a dense sprawl of heritage architecture and modern infrastructure. It supports millions through a network of historic trams and massive steel bridges, maintaining the highest concentration of bookstores and art galleries in the country. But before the concrete and the crowds, the 17th century landscape looked very different. In place of the city were three quiet farming villages, Sutanati, Gobindapur, and Calcutta, resting on the muddy banks of the Hooghly River. The river's natural geography provided a deep water harbor. When the British East India Company arrived, they turned the shoreline into a global commercial artery, where small local wooden boats ferried goods to large steamships bound for Europe. Managing global trade at this scale required a permanent military presence. Over several decades, the company shifted from a syndicate of merchants into a territorial power, seeking to build a base that could survive a sustained siege. This led to the construction of Fort William. Its heavy stone walls and guarded drawbridges were designed to be impenetrable, creating a fortified colonial anchor that ignored the existing geography of the villages. By 1772, the British formally designated Calcutta as the capital of British India. They expanded the docks and administrative centers to an imperial scale, creating a maritime hub that could process the wealth of the entire subcontinent. The city's layout was a political statement. Grand avenues and massive stone offices were engineered to project the permanence of British rule, built to command the land and its people indefinitely. The British built Calcutta to be the ultimate impenetrable stronghold of their power. Yet, the very infrastructure they created to secure the empire would eventually provide the tools for its collapse. By the 19th century, the British needed a massive bureaucracy to manage their territorial gains. Realizing they couldn't staff the empire with Europeans alone, they began training a generation of Indian clerks to operate the colonial state's daily machinery. To house this bureaucratic engine, they erected massive institutional shells. The Writers' Building served as the primary administrative center, its grand facade signaling the weight of the colonial government. This administration turned the city into a global trade hub. In 1890, Clive Street was a corridor of constant commercial activity, where international storefronts managed the flow of wealth from the Indian interior to the rest of the world. However, the introduction of Western education, global literature, and printing presses backfired. The British sought obedient administrators, but they inadvertently introduced a vast array of revolutionary political ideas to the local population. Educational hubs like Presidency College became centers for critical debate. This era, the Bengal Renaissance, saw scholars and students using their training to question both colonial authority and traditional social hierarchies. These scholars used the city's printing presses to publish new literature, advocate for social reform, and organize a unified political consciousness that began to reach far beyond the city's borders. By building a machine for economic extraction, the British provided the specific intellectual and logistical infrastructure that a unified Indian resistance needed to challenge them. Fearing the political organization they had helped spark, the British attempted to fracture the region's influence. In 1905, they ordered the partition of Bengal, a move intended to weaken the resistance by splitting the population along religious lines. The partition had the opposite effect. It moved the political energy from the classroom to the pavement, turning intellectual theories into a cycle of aggressive, street-level protests. This was the birth of the Swadeshi movement, a coordinated national effort to boycott British-made goods and stall the economic engine of the colonial state. The protests were highly visible and targeted. Activists patrolled the streets, publicly shaming buyers of foreign products. They paraded animals carrying English signs that read, "We cannot see the advantage of Swadeshi goods because we are donkeys." The constant strikes and mass gatherings eventually made Calcutta ungovernable. The very heart of British administration was now paralyzed by the people it was built to control. In 1911, the British reached a breaking point. Unable to maintain order in the city they designed as their fortress, they abandoned Calcutta, moving their capital to the more isolated city of Delhi. The capital's removal was a major political victory. It proved that a mobilized, organized population could physically displace the administrative core of the British Empire. India finally secured its independence in 1947. This national outcome followed decades of political pressure, much of which originated in Calcutta through the early organization of mass boycotts and the refinement of civil disobedience. Across the city, the public reclaimed the streets. Massive crowds marched through old colonial districts, replacing imperial symbols with the flag of a sovereign nation. But this victory came with a severe localized cost. The 1947 partition of India also violently bisected the region of Bengal, creating a new international border that cut through its economic and social heart. The demographic shift was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of refugees fled from East Bengal toward Calcutta, placing an unprecedented strain on the city's resources and permanently changing its social landscape. Despite this trauma and the earlier loss of its status as the national capital, the city remained the center of India's intellectual life. It continued to produce the majority of the nation's Nobel laureates and pioneering filmmakers. The massive British palaces were eventually reduced to historical curiosities. The Victoria Memorial, once a symbol of an empire that commanded the globe, became a quiet backdrop for public parks and tourism. Daily life in Calcutta eventually outlasted the colonial infrastructure. The tram lines and administrative halls were absorbed and repurposed, serving as the functional background for a vibrant, modern Indian culture. The transformation from Calcutta to Calcutta shows the resilience of a population that outlived its colonizers. Today, the city is defined by the way its history was reclaimed by the people, a place where the imperial landscape was permanently rewritten to serve an independent future.